Now, according to the indictment, Adams, quote, sought and accepted improper valuable benefits, such as luxury international travel, including from wealthy foreign business people and at least one Turkish government official seeking to gain influence over him. Eric Adams also sought and received other improper benefits from some of the same co-conspirators who funneled straw donations to his campaign. Prosecutors say that eventually Turkish officials called in the favor. Once again, from the indictment, quote, in September 2021, the Turkish official told Eric Adams that it was his turn to repay the Turkish official by pressuring the New York City Fire Department to facilitate the opening of a new Turkish consular building, a 36-story skyscraper, without a fire inspection, in time for a high-profile visit by Turkey's president. At the time, the building would have failed an FDNY inspection. In exchange for free travel and other travel-related bribes in 2021 and 2022, arranged by the Turkish official, Adams did as instructed. Adams, now the first sitting mayor in the city's history to be indicted, is denying the charges and insisting he will remain in office.
I ask New Yorkers to wait to hear our defense before making any judgments. I will continue to do the job for 8.3 million New Yorkers that I was elected to do.
That's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends, all here at the table with me. State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Aronberg is here. Also joining us, New York Times editorial board member and MSNBC political analyst Mara Gay is here. And NBC News investigative reporter Tom Winter is at the table. He's been tracking the story for us for a long time. Tell us about the indictment and the response.
Right. Well, the response, what was interesting is the indictment said a lot, but it does not cover all of the things that we have been hearing about that are under investigation. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the U.S. attorney, typically they say, well, there's an ongoing investigation or we're going to continue to look into things. He didn't make a threat today. He made a promise. He said, we will hold more people accountable. He is promising more law enforcement activity, whether in the form of arrests, guilty pleas, indictments, whatever it is. So it is very clear that they are not done. But today's box, if you will, that's now been wrapped up and presented to the court, makes it clear that this conduct involving Adams, as alleged, has been going on for quite some time, that this goes back to when he was borough president, before he was even running for mayor. And so the question is, and you just read directly from, I think, a key component of this indictment, which is the idea of repaying for something. And that's where this really becomes a problem. The other problem here is that he solicited donations, allegedly, and donations were provided that came from a foreign entity, a foreign individual, and then were perhaps moved through straw donors. That's a big concern for the federal government. They are really concerned, particularly in New York, and we've seen this on the China end of things, now apparently a focus on Turkey as well, this idea that foreign nationals are really starting to put their thumbs on the scale of the way New York City and New York State government are running. And if that's the case here, I think the broader question for us is folks wonder, well, Nicole, why are you talking about Mayor Adams and a New York City mayor today? He's a huge figure in politics in this country. New York City is hugely important to this country, whether you like that or not. But also, is this going on in your community? And I think there's a real question about that. So all of those were themes that kind of popped out, as well as Adams's behavior. He had his phones taken by the FBI when they approached his detail. Then they had a subpoena for his personal phone. According to the indictment, he changes the password on that and then tells the FBI that he forgot the password that he just set. I'm reading from the indictment, and was unable to provide the FBI with a password that would unlock the phone. So it's going to the way he operates and the way he behaves. So if all of this is true, it's difficult, but I haven't talked about the NYPD investigation. I haven't talked about all the other members of his administration, top-level figures, first deputy mayor of public safety, schools chancellor, all of whom are related in some way. They have all had their phones taken or been searched. What happens with those investigations? So today feels more like a building block than it necessarily feels like the entire wall. And yet we're talking about the person at the top.
Tell us about the broader picture of an entire administration potentially paralyzed by those other investigations you alluded to.
Yeah, paralyzed, I think, is a fair adjective, because as I talk to people in New York City government, whether it be at the police department or in City Hall, that really is the question. How does he move forward right now? Who can he pick up the phone and call and say, let's do an event on Tuesday. And let's talk about this new initiative I'm going to launch. Nobody's going to touch that. There's no indication that anybody in the city, and everybody that I talk to, there's no indication that anybody is calling City Hall right now and saying, you know what, Mr. Mayor, let's launch this thing. Let's move on and turn the page. So that paralyzes the city government component of it. Look, people have their trash picked up tomorrow. The fire department will respond to calls tomorrow. That type of activity will continue. But another question is what happens at the police department? Because we have not heard about that investigation in today's charges. That is being handled by federal agents assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office, not by the FBI. So that's really compartmentalized as that investigation comes out. And if there are charges, the loss of trust within NYPD leadership could be a real challenge for that agency. And I am concerned about a brain drain there as far as people that day in and day out are not at all surrounding this corruption, that do important counterterrorism work, that do important intelligence work, that do important detective bureau work. Will some of those top level commanders or some of the people that work in those agencies say, you know what, my time's up, I can retire, I'm out of here? And what impact does that have on the city long term? That's a big question.
And let me just be really clear. So there's the combination of brain drain, people leaving voluntarily, high-level quality people because they don't want to be tainted. But there are also other high-level officials ensnared potentially in the multiple investigations, right?
100%. I mean, look at and this was an interesting appointment by Mayor Adams, Phil Banks. He's the deputy mayor for public safety. He oversees the police department and he oversees the fire department. So Phil Banks was an unindicted co-conspirator in a previous administration and had to resign from the NYPD in 2014 and came about as close as you can get, according to court documents in our prior reporting and unfolding and all the great work of other people you know, Jonathan Dietz, Melissa Russo, came very close to being indicted back then and still is appointed to this position in this administration, which raises some questions. And there have been a number of people in the New York City community that have wondered why this person is back in that spot. He had his phone taken. So to be clear, I'm not sitting here saying that any of the departments or any of the agencies that there's some sort of resignation or mass resignation in the works. Just knowing what I know about all these places, I am concerned, do we get to a tipping point there? Or do these folks say, you know what, we'll fight through this whether we're going to stick it out and see what we can do to help New York City. I wouldn't blame them for either direction they choose.
I mean, and not that our audience needs to be reminded why this matters, but we're sitting here about 2.5 weeks after the anniversary of 9/11. I mean, the city is a potential target for terrorism. It is a city where crime is a national story in both directions. Mm-hmm. The numbers, the success story is as important to the stories being told about what works as the rising crime figures were 5 years ago when COVID first hit the city. I mean, what happens here matters. It has serious ramifications, and there's a serious confidence crisis facing this administration.
Well, certainly, Nicole. Also, New York City's economy is a major driver of the national GDP. And so and of course, it's also home to the United Nations. There is a reason why foreign officials were interested in even what at the time was a low-level Democrat in office. I mean, the startling part of this story really is that Eric Adams, when he was targeted by Turkish officials, was actually the Brooklyn borough president. That's a job that doesn't hold much political power. Yeah. So, of course, part of the concern here is, well, who else are these foreign officials engaged with? And so that's a serious concern as well. And of course, even within the indictment, there are moments where Eric Adams travels, to Istanbul on his way to Ghana before he takes office. Well, and he meets with a Turkish official. What did they discuss? What was promised? What was asked of the mayor? Mm-hmm. We don't yet know. I also just want to say that the city does have more than 8 million people here. There are about 300,000 municipal employees who, as you said, they're going to pick up the trash tomorrow. They're going to educate your child. They're going to drive buses and trains. They're going to be on the lookout for terrorism. And they're continuing to do their job. Their job is much harder today than it was yesterday because of Eric Adams. And also just part of the frustration is we have never in New York City seen a mayor who looked at public office as his own personal slush fund. The extent of the narrative, and of course he's entitled to a defense, he says that he's innocent, okay, but the extent of the narrative that is alleged against him in this indictment is stunning, because this wasn't about bending the rules. This was about putting people, his own cronies, in public office who were essentially, apparently helping him to use that public office to gain favors with foreign officials. And then in the midst of this, he procured $10 million in public taxpayer money to help him get elected by using straw donors. And so this is a stunning betrayal. And I think that New Yorkers are right to be concerned about also just who is running the city at this point. Mm-hmm. There's no, we've got resignations or pending resignations from the Commissioner of Education, we have an interim police commissioner who also has seen a raid, unrelated. We don't even know what that's about. We've got the resignation of the city's public health official who is not under investigation, but simply couldn't take it anymore, it appears. So I just want to say this is not business as usual. Part of what is stunning to me as someone who's covered City Hall for over a decade is the extent to which Mayor Adams made quick work of what had been a very clean City Hall, stacked with public servants who may agree or disagree with certain policies, but were there for the public good. And I talked to many of them today. Many of them are longtime sources in and out of government. They are heartbroken. And these are officials who are working on housing policy, who are trying to make sure that kids can read. And they are saying today, who is in charge? And I thought we were working for the public. Why isn't our boss working for the public?
What are those